Castro, after he retired in 2006, was very careful never to say anything publicly that directly contradicted what his brother's policies were. But the economic reform program that Raul began in 2011, which is to move toward more of a market socialism on the China model, was something that Fidel Castro had always rejected himself. And the normalization of U.S.-Cuban relations is something that Fidel Castro was very skeptical about. Right after Obama's visit to Havana in March, he said that Cuba didn't need anything from the United States, and he warned that really this was, the United States was never going to change. It always was going to be trying to return to a domination of Cuba. Now, I don't think he himself interfered much with his brother's decision-making, but there are other people in the political leadership who agreed with Fidel and would like to go slow on these things. Now that he's gone, I think they're in a weaker political position.
Right. William, you wrote a piece for Foreign Policy with the headline, "Will History Absolve Fidel Castro?" I'll ask you to answer the question for us right now.
Well, Castro did things at the very beginning of the revolution that were extremely popular. He kicked the United States out, for one, which was popular in Cuba because Cuba is a very nationalistic country, and the United States had dominated it for half a century. He gave everybody free health care and free education. He did away with legal segregation. The result of these policies was that there was a lot of support on the island. Right. Now, he also did away with Cuban free markets, and so the upper class and the middle class, most of them came to the United States. He promised free elections, but he didn't deliver on them. So there are a lot of things that he did that over time, I think, have led to an erosion of the support for the government. Right. And of course, the Soviet-style economy that he put in place just didn't work.
William, if Donald Trump asked you over to Trump Tower today and said, "Give me 5 minutes for your best advice," what would you tell him?
I tell him to consult widely before he changes U.S. policy. There are a lot of stakeholders involved in the policy that Barack Obama put in place, and not least among them ordinary Cubans who are overwhelmingly in favor of better relations with the United States because it means more tourism and more trade, and that boosts the Cuban economy and ultimately boosts their standard of living. Even Cuban dissidents, they're divided on it, but even Cuban dissidents, some of them will tell you that when U.S.-Cuban relations are better, they have more political space for expression. And finally, there are lots of U.S. businesses that in the last 2 years have begun commercial deals with Cuba, and they have a lot invested. Starwood Hotels, Airbnb. Those are constituencies that think that the U.S. policy that Obama put in place is actually working.
Professor, you know, we were asking this morning what happens after Fidel Castro, but should we be asking what happens after Raul Castro? He has said in the past that he will step down in 2018. That's not very long from now. Do you expect that timeline to be in place? And are there succession plans, do you think, in the works?
Well, I think there's no doubt that his intention is to step down in 2018. He's put in place term limits so that no senior official can serve more than 2 5-year terms, and his second term as president is up in 2018. And he's criticized other communist countries, specifically the Soviet Union, for not having a normal succession plan. Right now, there is a first vice president who is the constitutional successor. His name is Miguel Diaz-Canel. He's a Communist Party official who rose through the ranks of the Communist Party. And he would likely be the successor if, for example, Raul Castro were to pass away in his sleep.
Professor, real quick, you saw the diametrically opposed statements that Donald Trump put out and that President Obama put out. What did you make of that? And what do you think the Cuban people made of that?
Well, you know, Cubans, many ordinary Cubans, are actually very worried that Mr. Trump will come in and actually undo all the things that President Obama has done and sort of throw us back to the old Cold War era of hostility. And so his statement on the death of Fidel Castro reflected that more hardline view, whereas President Obama's statement was very presidential, was very carefully crafted. You know, I think one of the things that we're seeing is Mr. Trump is still in the process of transition from a candidate to a president. There is a difference between campaigning and governing, and I think he'll get it right eventually. But the tone of his statement was off-putting, I think, to many Cubans. There's still a lot of Cubans in Cuba who remember the old regime the elder generation that still has a lot of affection for Fidel Castro as the founding father. Sort of a grandfatherly figure to many people. That's not true in Miami, obviously, but if we're ever going to knit back together the Cuban community, that is to say the Cuban Americans in our country and the Cubans still in Cuba, there needs to be more mutual respect.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.